Charles, it's the silent opening.
There you go.
Welcome to Closing In.
It's a pleasure to be here. And this art department, I mean, I don't know how, you're going to have to sell shares to pay for the bonuses that the art department deserves here. This is just amazing.
Shares in what?
I don't know. Something.
Exactly. They come up with something to share with people and then share it.
Perhaps you could explain, because maybe the people won't necessarily get who all these faces are, but I mean, this is just fantastic.
Right. Well, you know, we're going to be talking about New Zealand today. It's interesting. This is our second Hobbit or, well, you know, Lord of the Rings style show. We had Lord of the Crime Rings back in the day when we introduced everybody to Harmon Wilfred. And today we've got the Robbit. The tweet I put out, or did I put out a tweet? The description said, did Bill Clinton ever intend to rule this country or just rob it?
That's very good. Very good.
So I put together a laundry list. I've seen The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, of course, but out of all the sort of science fiction and fantasy movies that exist, I'm not a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. It always sort of seems like a bunch of midgets killing each other in the woods. Sorry, that's short people or whatever you're supposed to say.
Height challenged people.
Yeah, but I just, you know, it's not my favorite. So I don't necessarily know who all these characters are and what their significance is. There could be somebody in the audience who will be annoyed with who I've selected, but we made Bill Clinton the main guy.
And that is what's called a cadaverous face.
Yeah.
With lipstick, it looks like.
Well, because what I usually do is to match the face to the poster, I'm using the skin tone of whoever.
No, I think it's great.
And then we've got Mr. Mueller as Gandalf the whatever.
Robert Mullet.
Robert Mullet. Yeah. He's got a shave, Charles.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And then down the line here, we've got a rogues gallery. We've got Andrew McCabe, Michael Horowitz. This guy's a little hard to recognize. Joe Biden. Christopher Wray.
He thinks he's in Germany in this poster, right? Not in New Zealand?
Something like that. You got Comey there.
Dopey.
Oh, looks like Peter Strzok's face got turned off in the final composite. This was Peter Strzok. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Eric Holder. B-Rock.
B-Rock.
Oh, a second face got turned off. Darn.
Well,
see,
this is the original real movie. It didn't get turned off.
No, that was, I don't know how that happened. I was rushing.
Is that going to be Anthony Weiner? Looks a little bit like it.
No, it wasn't Anthony Weiner. It was Epstein. This was Epstein, because then we had Weinstein right here. That's too bad, because that was a fun one. Epstein, Weinstein, Nadler doing the dishes.
That's
Nancy Pelosi.
I wouldn't want to get anywhere near Nadler's dishes.
No.
Of course, so would they be clean as a whistle, because he would have, licked them clean.
And then we've got Barr, who, counts as a deep stater in my book. Oh, and of course, as the Schmiegel, we've got Adam Schiff.
Shifty Schiff.
Shifty Schiff. Exactly.
Good.
I don't understand how those faces got turned off. I'm going to have to revisit that.
That's all right. Well, it's a great work of art. Thank you for that. And this is really, we're now I guess this is our 201st show together, which this one will not be 2 hours. It'll be more like 90 minutes. But that is a lot of hours.
It is.
And if some people may think, why are you wasting your time on all this? And let me lay another card on the table here. When the real investigators, be they Durham or another set, go back over the exhaustive record, which includes the many presentations and interviews done by Peter Schweitzer and others, as well as the ones I've done with a variety of different journalists predating my affiliation with you, Jason. You can compare and contrast what we said, what we alleged, with what the FBI and the Department of Justice and the IRS may have done, going as far back as when I started, February 2015, or you can go further back if there are other people who have been banging the drum on this. And what you're going to see is either that the FBI did sweet fuck all. Sorry for that.
That's all right.
And just sat. SFA. It was the SFA department of the FBI. Or you're going to maybe find out that there was a large team. Andrew Napolitano wrote a piece, I think, in around January 2016, alleging that there were 100 FBI agents on this. So you can go back over the history, that is to say, anyone going over the ground of what the FBI and the Justice Department and the IRS may have done, starting as early as January 2016, and you're going to see that perhaps there were some loyal FBI patriots who really wanted to do something about this and wind this thing up and bring it to justice, and that those people were turned down by people in the Department of Justice. And the question is, are those people who were in the Department of Justice, are they still there? And what might they be doing to impede Donald Trump up and down the chain? So then when you get to the time period with us, where we started just the month after Mueller was appointed, in June of 2017. And so you can overlay what Mueller was doing, if you're the Barr and the Justice Department and the FBI and the IRS, you can overlay what it is that Mueller did and the tactics that Mueller took against people he thought and the team thought were in collusion with the Russians. You can look and see how aggressive they were and how they jobbed the FISA court, how they yesterday there was a revelation that there was a Treasury Department employee who leaked confidential information on members of the Trump campaign to the Mueller organization. And that person's going to jail for that. So you can then look at every single one of our videos. You can say on such and such a date, Jason and Charles said this. What did you do? Bob Mueller, what did you do?
Mueller burger and a cocktail.
Right. I'll have another. I'll give you another. Take that vat that Hillary fills up with Chardonnay every day and fill mine with single malt. And meanwhile, whoever else was on the team, this just happened by accident that there's 17 angry, Clinton supporters on the Mueller team. Every single one of them was anti-Trump. That was just a coincidence.
Wasn't there another one who got arrested for child pornography?
Just recently put away for, I think, 10 years or something.
It was a real team of winners. These guys there.
Exactly. They know how to roll. So you could take significant event, and then you can look at the allegations that we made day by day and say, does the FBI have a circular file department? They just, somebody sends the videos that we do and the slides into the FBI, and they say, that's great. We'll print these out. It's cold now. It's winter. This will help. We'll burn these things. It will help us start a fire. Or do they actually do any work? And either way, I think it's a damning indictment of the presence of the status quo. And it may well, this work and other work that Fitton has done, that you do independent of me, and others, should help Trump, if he is serious, to reform the status quo, which badly needs to be done. And if it isn't done, if there aren't tangible signs of it being done prior to Election Day this year, Donald Trump's not going to win.
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful that he will. I'm hopeful that he's doing these tangible things. Every day we're getting kind of more and more disappointed, certainly in William Barr. There's people in the audience who get upset when I say anything negative about somebody who's perceived as being on Donald Trump's side. Like if I say that Devin Nunes is either a dope or part of the problem, people get upset because Devin Nunes has done good things to help Donald Trump. But I do want people to remember that the number one way that an infiltrator infiltrates is to do something to gain the person's trust. So we got to be very careful of some of these people whose, if the totality of their actions do not seem to be sensible, or if there's a red flag there. I mean, William Barr, that whole press conference he did about the Pensacola, Florida shooting where he was making a big deal about Apple.
Right.
That seems like a play to penetrate the encryption that protects all of our privacy.
Well, it could be, but let's stay focused if we can just on these slides, because I've got 12 slides to go into, and there's a fair amount of detail.
Okay.
So we've taken you literally around the world to many different donor countries, recipient countries across the United States. Cool. And today we're going to talk to you about New Zealand. There have been some very interesting developments in New Zealand. We start, the body of our work proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, as far as I believe, that there isn't a single lawfully organized, operated, or reported portion of the vast criminal Clinton Foundation network. Not a single one of these entities was ever organized or operated lawfully, and no report is factually correct.
At least they're consistent.
And so we find ourselves with this is a very interesting person, Jacinda Ardern. Is actually not quite, she'll be 40, I think, in mid-year this year. She's been the Prime Minister of New Zealand since October of 2017, so when she was 37.
And pregnant.
She was pregnant and has delivered herself of a young child, even though she's not married. So here's somebody who is arguably a single mother caring for a young infant. And keep that in the back of your mind. The issue of, I have two children, and many years ago they were infants. And because I am completely incompetent in all household-related matters, I hired a staff to take care of them. And they were very careful in the way we were careful in what the children were fed and how they were looked after. And most people think, you see a Gerber baby food, you see this baby food and that baby food, and you think, well, it's got to be good. Little babies are incredibly susceptible to any type of infection or problem, and you really have to be very careful. And you should not assume that baby food manufactured in a place like Ethiopia or Rwanda is going to be all that good for you. Yet, as I will reveal shortly, the government of New Zealand found itself, prior to Madame Ardern's tenure as Prime Minister, funding a venture to manufacture baby food in Ethiopia and Rwanda with a Dutch company in league with the Clinton Health Access Initiative, which didn't exist, and sent it 8 payments that we were going to document for you. Every one of those 8 payments was fraudulent. Every single one of them.
It just doesn't seem like the type of thing you would get from, is Ethiopia known for its baby food?
It's not known for its food. There isn't much
right,
there.
Particularly New Zealand, I will say this, the produce, and baby food is like carrots and bananas and stuff, right? It's great in New Zealand. Why would they import baby food?
Not to New Zealand. So what they were trying, I'll run through the arguments, you'll see it in a second, but Jacinda Ardern has an Eric Hansen, the CPA from
BKD.
Beyond Knowing Dick. She has a woman for all seasons moment here. She can stand up and she can, and I've contacted her personally before the show. I'm going to send her again this presentation, the video once we're done with it. And thank you to our friends in New Zealand who have made certain information available to me by email that was obtained through the equivalent of our Freedom of Information Act request. Madame Ardern has a chance to stand up and say, you know what, this business of asserting that there are all these problems in poor countries and then convincing the New Zealand taxpayer and other taxpayers to join in a club of doing these deals that sound like they could make sense and are noble, but allowing the people doing the deals to be crooked fraudsters like the Clinton Foundation, Clinton Health Access Initiative, funding these things year and year, that business needs to stop. And it's not simply a question of stopping to fund fraud. Madame Ardern has to stand up, if she wants us to take her seriously, which she may not care, she has to stand up and demand that New Zealand taxpayers get their money back, that Ira Magaziner and Bill Clinton and many others in the so-called Clinton Health Access Initiative pay heavy prices. I think this is a matter we will demonstrate that these crimes have been committed under New Zealand law. So this is an opportunity to, in the New Zealand jurisdiction, go after these globalists, go after these high-profile people, and therein send a message that New Zealand no longer will tolerate, though it cares about helping people in these poor countries. It will no longer tolerate the virtue signaling former politicians of the world swanning around in private planes and claiming that they're doing things like, feeding babies in Africa and fighting HIV, AIDS, and climate change, when in fact they're doing nothing other than feathering their own nests. We will see now whether this young prime minister will rise to the occasion or whether she'll just join the slew of other people in small countries who see the scam for what it is and say, I could do that. You know, I'll be prime minister for a little while, then I'll go be head of the World Health Organization or some other multilateral organization, and I'll scam for the rest of my life because nobody will catch me.
Seems to me that having a baby, even if you have two parents, everybody that I know that's done it, it kind of occupies all your attention for 2 or 3 years. And then I would think being a single parent makes it harder. And then being the prime minister of a country, how can you do that?
I'm sure she has help, staff.
Definitely not neglecting the baby at all.
No, probably not. But so we're going to now take it. Everyone says, "Where's the evidence?" This is a small piece of the puzzle. There are other countries that have been defrauded to the tune of $300 million. Here we're talking about a mere 7 or 8. But the example and the facts are very stark. And I suggest, Jason, in view of the time, that we jump in a little bit, explain. We can chit chat about a few recent developments which are relevant, but we should remind everybody that this is a special type of show. This is not news in 2-minute bites. This is an approach we've been taking now, realizing that it is such a big topic. We do all these presentations more or less in the same fashion. We update you on relevant things that you should care about that are happening in the current moment. And then we pick a sliver of this Clinton Foundation fraud and we go and do a deep dive on it so that you can understand, here's this angle, why this angle of the Clinton Foundation is indicting. It's indicting not just of the Clintons and the donors, it's indicting of all the governments who haven't done anything about it and are sitting on their hands. So this marks the 201st episode. Jason has put all of our episodes, save for today's, into a playlist, and you might want to pull that one up.
Yeah. Someone is saying that Periscope got shut down after, I think that's incorrect. But people who are just coming to the show for the first time, Charles, or perhaps for less than the 201st time, can review all of the episodes of Sunday with Charles, and Charles Ortel is closing in on this handy playlist on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel. That's the main Crowdsource the Truth YouTube channel. That channel has been hit by a malicious social engineering strike that prevents live streaming. People who want to watch the shows as they live stream are going to want to become subscribers to the Crowdsource the Truth 2 YouTube channel. Just search for Crowdsource the Truth 2. You can also utilize Super Chat on Crowdsource the Truth 2. And for any one of these videos, Charles, when people click on them, once the video loads, if they simply, it's taking a moment to load here, but right below the video is a description box that contains information about the video. It contains the sponsorship links. And when you click on this little show more piece of text, it's going to bring up this link that allows you to download the PDF presentations that Charles uses to drive the program. And you can either download it to your own computer or view it on screen. You can print it out. There's a download icon right here, and it's a convenient way. Some people might just want the PDF documents and read through them without watching the shows, but you can handle that however you like.
Yeah, and especially for you, Madam Prime Minister in New Zealand, and your staff, you will see that there, for most of these presentations, I would say for at least 180 out of the 201, there are supporting materials, every one of which has links to the underlying details so that you can, this is not a lecture series where you come away and you're supposed to not do anything else. This is an approach where we want to engage your minds. If you've got an attorney general, you're part of the extended Five Eyes group, you have the ability to look at transmissions around the world. You want to flag any transmission, any email, any report that you can find, any telephone conversation involving Clinton Health Access Initiative, the Clinton Foundation, anywhere in the world. That's what you want to look for. And then you want to overlay those against the timeline that we've put out in these slides, showing that there never was a lawfully organized or operated piece of the Clinton Foundation. Never was. Which means that every request for a donation, whether made in person in your country in New Zealand or worse, from Washington, D.C. or New York, by telephone or email or whatever, every one of those communications is a fraud.
Yeah, Periscope seems to be down, Charles.
Sorry to hear that.
No, we'll check it out after the show. I have an idea as to why that might have happened. You know, because what's going on, Charles, is I've been trying to upgrade some of the technology of the show. So we mentioned last week that the live streams are now presented in full 1080p at twice the bit rate. And this is pretty rare. I've been looking around at other live streams. They're not doing that. One of the reasons I wanted to do it is that we present a lot of text, and for people who are watching on a big TV, this should make it better. But I've had to add yet another service to make it work on Periscope, because Periscope doesn't support that format, and I think something might have gone wrong with that. So it's not necessarily sinister.
All right. Good to know. And if people have constructive comments to make, please do so on my website, via Twitter, to me or to Jason. Really appreciate the many constructive comments that we get from around the country and around the world. I hope soon, we haven't done a presentation on the Obama Foundation yet and what's going on in Chicago, but we are going to go there in depth. And so people who are soliciting funds for the Obama Foundation, thinking that that's a good idea, and thinking that if they collect money, that they're going to be able to hold on to that money without ultimately paying a very steep financial price, because they failed to register to solicit property and properly and report properly. Those people, those naive people who think they have the system gamed and locked, are going to find out that they're on the other end of an armada that is going to, I hope, go a long way to reforming the process by which former presidents of the United States feather their nests after they leave office.
It's a feathery nest, Charles.
Exactly. So why don't we go? We have the number of breaking events. There's just so many of them, and let's not necessarily click on each of these links, because I want to try to make sure I get mind the time. Apparently, the Pelosi and Schiff have selected, in fact, managers. And think that what you can do is, after you indict somebody, that at the trial you can show up with new evidence. That's not the way things work, supposedly. And I honestly believe that the people in the Democratic side of the House are, in the end, because history will be written about this important set of developments, are going to look incredibly foolish by the time this is all over. You know, the people are going to take a look in the Senate at the process by which the so-called indictment or impeachment was voted. They're going to compare it to past efforts. They're going to ask themselves whether the items that were listed as impeachable offenses rise to the level required. And the case is either going to be dismissed, should be dismissed with extreme prejudice, or it will go to a trial in which he will be acquitted. And all the while, people are going to be, for the rest of time, to the extent people care about America, which I hope will be for a long time, people are going to look at these Nimrods and say, what the hell were they thinking? I mean, supposedly, they look at everything through a political lens, which means trying to hold on to or increase power. And by this template, by these examples, I think there's a very high likelihood over time that people who are associated with this will be hounded out of the political arena.
It's interesting, Charles, because, you know, I speak all the time about lawfare and social engineering, and here we see it happening in Congress. This is absolutely an improper way to submit evidence, because all we've seen is some scratchings on a notepad from the Ritz-Carlton, right? And it seems to me like that is hearsay evidence. It's not being submitted in any kind of official process. It's already been in the newspaper. And in my view, that is being done to impeach the president in the court of public opinion, which is exactly what they've been trying to do all along. I think Adam Schiff is a disgraceful, shameful excuse for a lawyer, and everything that he's doing is way outside the bounds of due process.
I agree. So I had in the past been writing for the American Thinker, and it's an honor to do so with Thomas Lifson, who is the, I think, owner of the American Thinker. And the piece that I did yesterday immediately made it into this site, Lucien, which I guess you'd not heard of, Jason. But this is for people who are looking for an alternative to Drudge, to pick up the latest and greatest things that are coming out that are of potential relevance to people who like politics or business or international things. This is a great, what do you call it? A great screener of those types of stories. And if we hit the original article thing there, Jason, you can see the full story here. And so I got this out early when I saw, after our show, on Sunday, I reflected on what I believe the Clintons are trying to do here. And they're really, I see it, I won't say from whom, but the anchor of a major news organization contacted me today asking me, is there any truth to the Washington Post story about Huber? And I said, absolutely not. And I sent this. I would caution, when you look at the Washington Post or the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, in the old days, it used to be for any news story, you had to have at least 2, and preferably 3 sources independently confirming the truth of what you were alleging was the news item. And so here, there are no people on the record for that Washington Post story, which came out on Thursday night, right as several very important things were happening around the country and around the world. And I think that story was designed to influence the people who were going to consider minutiae relating to various parts and parcels of this unfolding drama, about the Russian hoax, how it got instigated, what is the motivation for the people who are throwing this Russian hoax against Trump and perpetuating it into Ukraine, and now Russian hoax too. What motivations do these people have? And I assert to you that I believe one common thread in Mueller, in Comey, in Rosenstein, and later in Obama and Holder and many other people, is the Clinton Foundation was a stillborn entity. It was founded, incorporated on October 23rd, 1997, but it was never validly organized. And it was kept in that state through the last impeachment process of Bill Clinton. Put yourself in Bill's position. As the news was leaking out about Monica Lewinsky into the public domain, and as people were getting upset, and then as the impeachment, as Ken Starr did his report, we're now talking 1998. And in that time period, the reports that we referenced concerning the Clinton Second Legal Expense Trust, one of the trustees of the Clinton Foundation, David Pryor, whose son was the Attorney General of Arkansas at the time, and could have stopped anything from happening, one of the trustees ran an illegal solicitation operation to pay off the legal bills that were mounting for the Clinton family in that time frame, and actually filed in Maryland a report on this legal expense trust claiming that it was a charity. And we have communications back from Maryland, from the relevant person in Maryland, saying in no way was this a charity. So this was happening in 98. They needed money. They've never accounted for how the Clinton Foundation was originally funded in 97. They've never filed a tax return for 97. And many, many people on the Mueller witch hunt team are people who will be humiliated when the truth comes out, finally, when governments stand up and say, you know what, this annoying Ortel guy and his friend, Jason Goodman, they've been right, and we're delaying, and we're only compounding the problem. And so this American Thinker piece is something I commend to you. In contrast, we have Eugene Robinson. Now, Eugene Robinson, when you look him up, he's written another a piece drawing on his colleagues' piece of Thursday last week, basically saying that, it's ridiculous to investigate the Clintons at this stage. Every time you invest, these people in the GOP are born liars. Huber, their hand-picked man, didn't find anything in the Clinton Foundation. And, it's just, you see this stuff coming out. And Eugene Robinson, I think, is chairman of the Pulitzer Prize Committee, or he was at one point.
I mean, but that's a piece of garbage, the Pulitzer
It used
Prize.
to be something that really meant something. But so you're seeing a lot of stories. And when I go back, as the limited experience I have in mainstream media, having done, several thousand interviews, is that when you do them, there's a process typically. If you're a regular on a show, they just call you on short notice. But if you're going to launch an assault against something, you cause the Washington Post to have a story, and then you work to have that story picked up in a place like, say, Rachel I'm an Idiot Maddow. who immediately jumped all over this story. And so that allows the various left-leaning, Clinton-loving garbage sites to put garbage out, all the while people forgetting there has never been confirmation that Huber actually did anything to be. What was Huber's assignment? Who gave him the assignment? It was Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. And what exactly did Huber do? I mean, this is something that we deserve to know at this stage. And who may have held Huber in check? How come Huber never responded to the 3 times that Larry Doyle and Whitey Moynihan sent thousands of pages of information already for them to digest? How come they never responded or asked any questions of those 3 guys? How come they've never contacted Victoria Tensing and Joe DeGenova, who were the lawyers for the whistleblower in Uranium One? How come? How do you wind down an investigation on the Clinton Foundation with having nobody talk to me? I'm not saying that to brag or anything, but we've done a little bit of work on the subject, and you would think if you wanted to save time, somebody would have done that. So what you see, and you're going to see more of it now, the Clintons have the ability through their many contacts and their money to get the advanced copies on this book coming out a week from yesterday by Peter Schweitzer. So that probably has damning information, perhaps drawn on internal documents having to do with Hunter Biden in the Ukraine. You see the story, which we didn't provide a link here to, of Russian hackers are responsible for getting the Burisma documents, and it's irresponsible for the elite journalists to write any stories about using these documents. I mean, it's just amazing. So if we go to this next link, the 4th link there, Jason, you have, I don't know what this national memo is.
That's a website?
Yeah, that should come up in a second here. Maybe.
Yeah, the problem is, there's a lot of problems here today. So, okay, hang on a second.
They're not coming up?
No, they are. It's just it's complicated to explain. There's a few things happening that are not what we want, but we'll have to roll with it here. So here we go.
All right. So this is a long article that hypes a study out of academia that claims that the Clinton Foundation stories, the stories, many of them that I had some role in bringing forward, and Peter Schweitzer did a lot of them, and others did many of them, that these Clinton Foundation stories were false, and nevertheless excited interest in social media and on Twitter. And there's a long academic, I think an MIT study, bemoaning the fact, how could all this fake news about the Clinton Foundation get so actively followed in 2016? And wasn't that perhaps one of the reasons that Hillary Clinton is not currently a resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but is more a resident of 2 gigantic mansions, maybe 3 if you count that she's got 2 next to each other in Chappaqua now.
Why do you need 2 mansions next to each other?
Because she bought it right before the election, the second one, under a theory that she was going to win and she needed space for her grandchildren and her staff and this and that. And why not have, it's not overbearing to think that, 2 people in their 70s with, 1 daughter and at that time 2 grandchildren would need to have 3 mansions. They need 3 mansions, but, we in America and around the world, we shouldn't have any private homes, according to the way these people are thinking. Anyway, this is this particular thing is an attack against Peter Schweitzer. It's an attack against anybody who may have promoted the idea that the Clinton Foundation is the fraud that I believe it is. And this thing appeared, I guess, just recently, today. But it's an example of stories that don't go to the heart of the issue. Show me articles of incorporation for the Clinton Foundation that were adopted by the board of the Clinton Foundation for any time period. Actual conformed and verified copies of the articles of incorporation for any year from 1988 forward. You can't do it. Show me bylaws. Show me board minutes. Show me audits. Now, with that and the fact that you can't do any of that, this is a sloppy article. Go and show me. Here they're talking about they did this great work, HIV/AIDS, economic inequality. Show me where in the Articles of Incorporation and the tax-exempt application for tax exemption, show me where the Clinton Foundation, we'll stop here for a second. Show me where they have valid authority. Now here they cite this idiot, Daniel Borochoff of Charity Watch. Charity Watch is a tiny little entity where this guy gets a nice almost $200,000 a year income from charging for producing reports on many charities that are surface level and skin deep. He has never done a serious review of the Clinton Foundation, but because this Charity Watch is itself a 501c3 organization and is out there, and because he's willing to talk to the press, because what he has to say is useful, this is a surface-level social engineering quote. If Hillary Clinton wasn't running for president, well, did she run? Did she merely waddle? Did she actually campaign in the key places? No, she didn't. The Clinton Foundation would be seen as one of the great humanitarian charities of our generation by the blind. It wouldn't be seen by anybody. There is no such thing as the Clinton Foundation. Narrowly, an entity called the Clinton Foundation. They unlawfully secured the right in Arkansas to use the fictitious name, the Clinton Foundation, but in no other jurisdiction outside Arkansas is there a plausible argument that the Clinton Foundation lawfully exists. So this guy, by his quote, demonstrates that he's incompetent. And the article goes on and on and on. So I just put this out there. You're going to see more and more of this. You're going to see people piling on. And as some of the more astute people I talk to point out, they wouldn't be doing all of this, that is to say the Clintons and their social engineers, if they didn't fear something looming soon. Again, let's not hit these links because I'm mindful of the time and what I have to tell you about. We have reports out of, we have the Project Veritas tape, and there's another one that just dropped against Bernie Sanders where his acolytes are saying, we've got to put Trump supporters in gulags and kill them. And there are people like that. I mean, you see them roam. I hear them talk. I live in a portion of New York where there are lots of such people, and they conspiratorially sit down and think that the arrogant ones don't bother to check who might be listening in, and they start bragging about what they want to do once they get into power, and they forget that America is a place where the large majority of people do not want to be ruled by some exalted, arrogant know-it-all. That is not what we signed up for in this country. And that type of approach, even if it's supposedly, going to be good for you, right? That's not what we want. Most Americans want to be left alone. We want a chance to enjoy the remaining years that we do have, to contribute productively to society, if that's what we choose to do. But we don't need direction from some bonehead mayor and governor and now President Bernie. That's not what we want.
We had enough exalted know-it-all with Obama.
Exactly. No Obama. And so what I also think is there's an interesting comment here from, and we don't have to put it up, the links, until we get to a few more of them. Van Jones, who is no conservative, reviewed the performance of the Democrats last night and said there's nobody yet who can take Trump on. So I think what they're trying to do here, that is to say the Clintons and the Obamas, I think they are trying to wound every announced candidate and then build an approach where there's a draft Hillary movement or a draft Michelle movement. And that's what we're going to see here in these coming days. And all of this, I mean, it's not like in Donald Trump you have somebody who's shy about criticizing the announced candidates. I did watch a bit of the Trump rally last night, and when Hillary's name came up, right away, lock her up. I mean, so I would like to actually pull this up. This is interesting, Press TV. This is an Iranian operation, and for the benefit of Angel Urena, Bill Clinton's press flack, who, while I think he may hail from Santo Domingo, does not know much about anything,
He was giving you flack.
You can go and check the number of times I've been on this, and this is hardly, a place for typical conservative people. I mean, this is a site that's run out of Tehran. It just was taken down in the UK by the UK government.
Why?
I don't get the whole reason, but as part of the sanctions program. But this is the show I'm on, and I've been on many, many times. I don't know, maybe 30 times or more. Is a show where they pick somebody who's pro-Iran to take some issue having to do with Iran, and then they take somebody who's against the current leadership to debate. And I have regularly called on to do that the anti-current government of Iran debate, and I've done it many, many times with people who are highly professional and respectful. And this is the way, honestly, I think people in the United States, and particularly Fake Yapper and the folks at CNN and elsewhere, will be actually pretty well served watching this site, looking at this site and saying, why should we assume that CNN is better than these guys? I mean, they actually go to the trouble of taking two polar opposite views and ask tough questions, both of the pro-Iran people and the anti-government person, me. And, we don't often agree on things, but this was a moment, Sunday I had done my show with you, our show, after this, but I had to, prepare for it and everything, and I said, well, okay, I can do this show for half an hour before I then, an hour later, start to do the show that we just recently did. So for Mr. or Urania, I'm not pronouncing it properly, forgive me, Iran is not Russia. And also Jason and I are not Russian.
Right.
And, I'm not bragging, but you can go and see that I regularly appear on Canadian, all sorts of international shows, Israeli, Iranian, I've been on Turkish, Chinese, many other different shows, many conservative, many U.S., progressive, you name it. And so to say that the only thing I do is Russian is ridiculous. And then to say that, it should be a black mark for me to be a close friend of John Solomon. I'm not really a close friend of him, but I've known him for a long time and I respect his work.
I mean, whatever. This is criticism coming from a guy who hangs out with Bill Clinton. So what the hell does he know?
Right. He probably wasn't the first pick for that job. So then we recently, again, let's not hit the next click, the Reuters click, but basically now, remember everyone said, whatever it was, 10 days ago when Trump amped the stuff up, everyone said, oh my God, Donald Trump is going to lose our allies. People are going to go against the U.S. over what he did, and relations in the Middle East will be horrible. The world will never be the same. The stock market's chicken little. And lo and behold, the Iranians exercised a lot of restraint. I think they were probably shown some rather onerous video of what was going to happen to them if they killed any Americans. But they exercised restraint. They quickly fessed up to the fact that they were the ones who shot down the Ukrainian airliner, which I thought was amazing.
You mean amazing that they admitted it?
Yeah, that they admitted it. And now the Europeans are joining with the U.S. to push for, as Boris Johnson says, a new Trump deal on Iran, not the Obama deal on Iran. Let's do a new Trump deal. And you have somebody I think we don't like, Jason, Mr. Jones, in the Zero Hedge piece, saying that Trump,
who?
Jim Jones, the guy you don't like.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But he said apparently that what Trump did was absolutely correct to kill Soleimani.
Ooh, that makes me feel not so good about it.
Well, I think I don't actually care too much what he has to say, but it's just interesting. Look, this thing has 0 shares, as if that's credible. But I think it's interesting that a former Obama level official would actually say that. I mean, you've got to remember, the person who put Soleimani, or however you pronounce it, on the list, the bad list, was Barack Obama.
Well, why didn't they kill him?
Exactly. So I think this is a major...
Yeah, but here's this idiot speaking at the Atlantic Council.
Yeah, where else would he speak?
That's what I mean. When the Atlantic Council and stooges like this say it's a good move, it causes me to become very concerned.
Well, no, it was a good move, and I think the point, though, that's interesting, he didn't have to do this, right? I mean, if Obama, remember, Obama, I would argue, did run a flawless campaign in 2008, not so much in 2012, but 2008, give him credit, was very well organized, very few missteps, and of course, nobody knew whether he would be competent or not, so they gave him the benefit of the doubt, foolishly. But I would never, if I were on Team Obama, I would never let this guy Jim Jones make these kind of comments, because it's kind of like the Huber argument. If you could say that Huber has wound down the investigation and found nothing, then that's very useful, so long as you have any proof of that. But you don't really have. Here you have an Obama person, national security person, saying it was the right thing to do, kill Soleimani. Kind of undercuts any Trump attack. But anyway, if we could just go back in.
Yeah, I don't know. Anytime we have these deep state swampies agreeing with Trump, I start to become very...
Right. So the trade deal, this is really interesting. This will really get Angel going. So another one of my friends, Angel, is this guy, Steve Bannon. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. So, but he's right here. I mean, I wish he'd shave, but he's this... I think he's right here on this Phase 1 trade deal is an enormous assault against the current Communist Party. We have to remember that in China, approximately 10% of the population are in the Communist Party and 90% are not. And you have riots in the street in Hong Kong. I think there is a growing understanding, given social media and just life, that this approach where 10% of the population in any country can keep the other 90% down doesn't, in the end, work too well, as we're seeing now in Iran. So Bannon's point is, I think, well taken, and good on Donald Trump for taking on the Chinese. When you look at the data, there are all these so-called trade experts who said that, the tariffs, I'm not for tariffs, they're never going to work. They have worked. Our trade deficit has shrunk, and now we have structural changes in our relationship with China that are long overdue and welcome. So I think that's good news. And then we talked about it this morning briefly, Jason, this idea that the government, and this is an RT report, that is, I'll give you this one, Angel. I've been on RT a lot, and that is actually Russian.
Yeah.
It's not fake Russian.
This is an unbelievable headline, Charles. How is this not the biggest news anywhere? The arguments asserted in this RT piece are that what Putin was trying to do was to weaken the office he currently holds by investing more power in various parts of the Russian government. Who knows what he's really up to? It is certainly a big, and I don't know that I heard any report from any pundit projecting that this might happen. So I do know that from what I read and hear, that people in Russia are less enamored of Putin than they used to be, because he's making changes like increasing the retirement age, which is a real problem because the average longevity, particularly of Russian males, is much, much lower than it is in the United States. So when you raise the retirement age for pensions, what you're doing is you're really harming a lot of people grievously. And so I can imagine why people would be upset with Putin if that's one of the reasons. We'll have to wait and see on this, but I'll just mark this down as another story where no member of the national security expert squad listed this as something we ought to worry about at the beginning of this year, which is only 15 days ago. Well, the other thing is I would hope that Donald Trump is watching this very closely, because whatever he could do, if Putin can get the Russian government to resign, Trump should do this in America. Get them all to resign.
Yeah, they effectively did in the House.
Right.
So with that, let's turn our attention to New Zealand.
Yes.
If you pull up that first link here, I have sent an email which we will share with the crowd in a later presentation, along with a response if we get one. But here's this prime minister who's very young, not the little girl in the soccer shirt, but I think it's the dark-haired lady in the center. And you see right here is that you have a telephone numbers, and you have
To
emails.
call the prime minister?
Yeah, this is her parliamentary office,
Wow.
but here's her email. So I sent an email to that address warning her that I was going to do this show and that I'm going to send her a link to the show. So if you go back into the slide, here we have an excerpt about she was born and grew up in a small rural area. She worked in London. She entered the Labour Party at age 18, and she became prime minister. I think it's in October 26, 2017. But look at this. It says she holds the roles of Minister for National Security and Intelligence, which sounds to me like the CIA, Minister for Arts, Cultural, and Heritage, which sounds to me like a boondoggle, and Minister for Child Poverty Reduction. Okay, that is exactly what this fake scheme that her government funded through the Clinton Foundation is all about. It says it's an issue particularly close to her heart. Okay, so here we have, in a recent story that was sent to me, if we hit this New Zealand Herald thing, on my birthday in 2017, when people in New Zealand noticed that Australia was saying, see you later, mate, to the Clinton Foundation, Clinton Health Access Initiative, people in New Zealand put together something. I guess there's the Taxpayers Union.
Well, I was going to mention that because you might recall that I actually interviewed the guy who was the chairman of that entire thing when I was in New Zealand. So that was pretty interesting.
Well, if you have his contact information, we should send this back to him. This new video back to him. But so as far back as 2017, before...
Sorry, Charles, hang on one second. I was trying to address something there, but it actually just made it worse. I am working on trying to improve things, but sometimes it's a little one step forward, two steps back.
So the prime minister was not prime minister in January of 2017, but there ensued a process where she became prime minister October 26, 2017. So she will have access to information inside her government about what people were telling the New Zealand population, what they were telling other members of government about their relationship with this Clinton Health Access Initiative. There should be a lot of information in the file. So if we go back into the slide, on the 7th of March, 2017, this thing, which is called, we call it New Chai, Clinton Health Access Initiative, somehow accomplished the following. The Clinton Foundation, the main Clinton Foundation, then called Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, controlled New Chai. But somehow, that main Clinton Foundation said, you know what, we don't want to control it anymore, you can have it. And for no consideration to the main Clinton Foundation, they voluntarily gave up their ironclad control over Chai, which we're going to explain how ironclad that was in a few minutes. So I don't believe that transaction was accomplished lawfully. I don't see how you had notice called properly. I don't see how the vote was accomplished. I question what the directors of that New Chai were told, how much they knew. And I believe that from an American perspective, there will eventually be a deep dive into this set of decisions. So by the 26th of October, she becomes prime minister. Then this bucket shop that's even worse, I think, than Beyond Knowing Dick, CR, and I'll keep it clean and not say what I'm thinking. But
I can only imagine.
I don't want to say what I'm thinking. So they issue a ridiculous audit.
What is CR?
Cohn-Resnick.
Oh.
They issue here in New York a ridiculous audit on the parent foundation that doesn't explain the loss of the biggest piece of the Clinton Foundation.
I thought they were a law firm.
No, it's an accounting firm.
Okay.
And then the New Zealand government, NZG, by October 8th of last year, they halt all payments to the Clinton Foundation. Here you see it, Jason, if we can hit that link.
Yeah, we've got some kind of echo bleeding through. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Very troubling. All kinds of things going on today, Charles.
That's all right. So here's a story, and I've contacted, here's his email. People want to contact him. I've contacted this guy, Jason Walls, who doesn't respond to emails. And he really should dig into this. I hope I'll send him this video.
The New Zealand Herald, I have to say, I'm not sure if that's basically a mainstream thing. I seem to recall people are going to have to go back to 2018 in the archives, but I went there with Hugh. I forget Hugh's last name, but we went in there and they were not too pleased with the questions we were asking. I think it's kind of the New York Times of New Zealand.
All right. Well, there must be a decent paper there. But nonetheless, this is a very critical story of the Clinton Health Access Initiative. Our man, Jason Walls, doesn't know his U.S. law well enough to see the real problem. And that's the purpose of this broadcast, to show you, and I'm not a lawyer, but it's to show you just how grievously wrong the information was that was conveyed, most likely by the Clinton Health Access Initiative in response to questions from the New Zealand government.
I would bet he's 28.
That's probably a good bet.
Given his two in his Twitter address there.
Or that could be his IQ. Then another Cohn-Resnick piece of garbage comes out, which again, when an auditing firm considers a complex beast like the big Clinton Foundation and finds out that in March 7th, 2017, that beast has decided to give up a piece which people were arguing, including the idiot from Charity Watch, that Clinton Health Access Initiative was a fantastic charity that was one of the most successful charities of the generation. Why would you give that away if it was so fantastic? And how come they got no consideration? And how come they reported for 2016 as if this CHI thing, they should have had a special calculation that showed trends in the Clinton Foundation excluding CHI 2016 versus 2017. They should have done that analysis. They should have reviewed the legal paperwork that explained exactly how main Clinton Foundation gave up this CHI, but they've done none of that. So the goal here is people who understand this, particularly if you have a tie to New Zealand, we really want you to put some pressure on Madam Ardern to do something about this. And we'll just give you fair warning. If you don't do anything about this, that means that you are part of the problem, and we're going to have to do something about you.
Tough words.
So let's keep going.
Indeed.
All right, so this is the reason behind New Zealand giving money to CHI appears to be that this CHI, or Clinton Health Access Initiative, was involved concocting a scheme with a Dutch company called DSM that is one of the world's leading suppliers of things that go into baby food and other foods. And these are excerpts here from a puff piece about what they were doing, saying, which is true, in the first 2 years, first 1,000 days from conception to your second birthday, so that's 40 weeks plus 2 years, that's really very important. What the mother eats and then what the child eats, extremely important. So you want to be very careful. And Madame Ardern, being a new mother, would understand this spot on. And they're saying here that whatever you feed this child will decide, in this time frame, will decide the fate of the child. Now, there's much more to it than that. This is a self-serving set of arguments, because what do these people do? They sell baby food, so they want you to buy their baby food. There are other things. But here, it says here that DSM concocted this scheme to manufacture baby food in Ethiopia and Rwanda. Those are not the places that I'd start on baby food first. But anyway, to do that in league with all of these shadowy organizations, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, which as it turns out didn't exist, but the International Finance Corporation, which are the boneheads who put $150 million into the piece of shit Laureate Education operation in January of 2013, the schmucks who put money into it when the sharks on Wall Street couldn't raise any money from normal sources. They said, well, we need a schmuck. Who's a dumb schmuck? Let's get the IFC. That's part of the World Bank. No one will ever look at what they're doing, and let's get $150 million out of them. So that's what they did with Laureate. What better bunch of fools to back a baby food project in Ethiopia and Rwanda than the IFC and the UK government and the Dutch government? and of course, Ira Magaziner's Clinton Health Access Initiative and Bill Clinton. So here's a DSM press release touting what they had done, and here's excerpts from a Freedom of Information Act request that was provided by the government of New Zealand to an unnamed individual in New Zealand. This is what the government of New Zealand provided as portion of a report from Clinton Health Access Initiative, and it confirms that the monies that the New Zealand government was providing to CHAI were going into this project that really looks to me, and all my years of doing investment deals, this is not a charitable project. This is an expansion of a for-profit operation, DSM, funded in part by the New Zealand government and other theoretically do-gooding organizations, where there has been no effective analysis of, what were the terms here? If this had been a for-profit operation alone, what should have investors gotten for the money they put up? How much capital was actually risked here by which parties for what potential return? And there's no analysis of that as far as I can tell. Now, when we think about making baby food, Jason, this is a link here from CBS News, okay, at the very bottom. And CBS, last I checked, is not a pro-Trump organization. Not that thing, Jason.
Oh.
This very bottom.
Ah, sorry.
This is a story came out around the same time that the New Zealand government pulled its funding for the Clinton Health Access Initiative.
Holy cow.
95% of baby foods contain toxic metals.
Oh my God.
Now this is CBS, and this is not, jumping all over some Ethiopian and Rwandan baby food plant. This is jumping over Gerber, the well-known, right here, Gerber, Beechnut, Earth's Best, Parent Choice. These are the ones that, frankly, I fed my children some of this stuff way back when. You probably had this stuff.
I definitely ate Gerber food, but I don't know if it had the lead in it. I was eating the carrot flavor, not the lead flavor.
Right. I remember my eldest child was eating so much of that stuff that turned orange.
The kid turned orange?
Yeah. Went to the doctor. Like, my kid's orange. Like you're
so
feeding,
much for those nannies, Charles.
I know. They were feeding too much carrot-based food. You turn orange. Wow. But anyway, this is why I say, people say that Bill Clinton, when pushed, said, well, we did more good than harm. That's not the standard. When you go into Africa, with volunteers, pie-eyed volunteers, and a bonehead in Ira Magaziner, an arrogant bonehead whose entire life is littered with failure after failure after failure in these cockamamie private-public partnerships that never seem to work. When you let somebody like that, probably with multiple BlackBerries, fly all over the place, constantly doing all these different projects, and nobody's checking anything, you can get into some serious trouble. And this is an example, I think, where they got into serious trouble. So they've been trying to make baby food in Ethiopia and Rwanda in a complex structure where nobody reports properly about anything. Yet, Nestle that owns Gerber, Nestle's a serious company.
Yeah.
And this is a study that says that substantially all the food that was tested by the well-known brands had arsenic or other toxic metals in them. Can you imagine what could be in the baby food that has been produced, or the supplements, or whatever these people are producing in Ethiopia and Rwanda, in league with the Clinton Health Access Initiative, which was never organized lawfully, never reported lawfully, is not allowed to do this in the first place? It's not a good sign. I mean, if you had, I don't know, God came down on earth again, and God said, I will help this project work, maybe I'd have some trust. But if you said to me, your expert witness here, your expert team, is Ira Magaziner and his band of intellectual dwarfs.
Perfect for the Robbit.
Right. It does not make any sense. So let's go, as if this isn't bad enough, let's look at some context. So if you go to the next page,
There are so many things that are out of control on this broadcast today, Charles.
That's all right.
I'm having a tough time.
All right. So this tries to put Ethiopia and Rwanda, compare it to New Zealand, to Netherlands, and to the Australians who wisely got out of supporting the Clinton Health Access Initiative and the Clinton Foundation, supposedly in 2016. So let's start. Ethiopia has 108 million people in it. Jason, how many of those people have no electricity?
Does it say 20%?
71 million of them, 70%.
No electricity.
Right? So that's roughly, 70%, call it 70%. In Rwanda, there's only 12 million people, and of those, 7 million have no electricity. Now, baby food and any drugs or whatever don't do well on the equator
Without a refrigerator.
without a refrigerator with no electricity, okay? Unlike, and you see that in New Zealand, Netherlands, and Australia, everyone has electricity. Right? So when you're sitting there and you're one of these starry-eyed young people who's going through university out of New Zealand, Netherlands, Australia, you can't conceive, unless you've been to these countries, of how bad things actually are in Africa. You have electricity. In New Zealand's a big country, Netherlands is a small country, Australia's a vast country. Nobody in these countries is without electricity, whereas 70% of these places where you're going to make baby food don't have electricity. In New Zealand, Netherlands, and Australia, over 80% of the people are packed into cities, which are easier to manage, right? In Rwanda, 17% are in cities. In Ethiopia, 20% are in cities. The populations in the donor countries are growing at 1% or less. In Africa, 2%, almost 3%. The healthcare systems in the donor countries are skewed towards caring for the aged. If you look at New Zealand and Netherlands and Australia, the population of senior people 65 and up is 80 to 100% or more the population of the youth. Here in Ethiopia, you got 47 million Ethiopian kids. In New Zealand, you got 900,000. Netherlands, 2.8 million. Australia, 4 million. That's a lot of kids with no electricity in Ethiopia and Rwanda running around rural areas where who knows, what's going to happen to them. And you look at the ratio, the senior is 16% to the youth, 6% in Rwanda, but it's, much, much higher in these other countries, the donor countries. Then you look at the size of an Ethiopia, 535 square kilometers. That's a lot of land, okay, in which are scattered a lot of people with no electricity. Whereas New Zealand is a big country, but still much smaller. Netherlands is about the size of Rwanda. And Australia, of course, is gigantic. Then we see in this big country, Ethiopia, with all these kids with no electricity running around, there's no roads, no paved roads.
They got a lot of problems.
I mean, you look at Rwanda, it's got 1,207 kilometers of paved roads, around the same population, Netherlands is slightly bigger. And it has 139,000 kilometers of paved roads. There's not a single, stick of railway in Rwanda. Not 1 kilometer. There are 4 airports, 17 in Ethiopia. Netherlands has 23. And it's so much smaller, the Netherlands, than Ethiopia. Then you look, getting to this issue of consumption. In all of Ethiopia, in the most recent year that we have data, 2017, all 108 million Ethiopians consumed $48 billion worth of stuff, which means they consumed in total $443 a person.
Guy Wilson is telling us that Pepsi is experimenting using placenta as a sweetener. That's disgusting.
That's really gross.
Yeah.
So then in Rwanda, they're a little bit richer. They consume $569 per person, whereas at New Zealand, in Netherlands, and Australia, it's $25,000, $21,000. These are different universes of operation. So to think that you could erect a plant that in a place like Ethiopia that has mountains and deserts and big changes in elevation, moisture content of the air, quality of the water, quality of the dirt, quality of the workforce. To think, close to the equator, that you're going to put out a world-beating baby food plant in Ethiopia and or Rwanda is to admit that you have a serious problem smoking crack. I mean, it's just,
maybe Stephen Halper is in charge of that.
He could be. And then you say, all right, you got babies running around, babies here and there, first 2 years of life, that's when babies need to get food. Okay, let's say your baby gets sick. In my experience with my kids, they're constantly sick. Why? Because kids get around other kids who are sick and they have this problem, and parents are very anxious in America. I was anxious. Take that kid to the doctor right away. Right? Okay, let's say you wanted to take your kid to the doctor. For 100,000 people in Ethiopia, you have 3 doctors.
Wow.
Right?
Why bother?
You think there might be a line?
Can they do anything?
Yeah, you sell the kid. I mean, in Rwanda, it's 13. And then you look at New Zealand, Netherlands, and Australia, it's 300, 351, 359. So, I mean, the difference is here. Put up some freaking electric plants, pave some roads, put up some hospitals, and encourage these pie-eyed do-gooders to go get their asses down to Ethiopia and Rwanda and provide some medical services, right? Get some more doctors into Ethiopia and Rwanda. These are real projects, but to sit there and say, well, yeah, what we're going to do with the Clintons, because they're renowned scam artists, we're going to create a baby food plant in Rwanda and Ethiopia. It's absurd.
It's the stupidest idea.
Yeah.
It's like opening, I don't even know, ice vending machine in.
Yeah, or it's like, you take somebody like me, my mother really was a serious musician, really wanted me to play the piano. And wisely, at like 4th or 5th grade, after, me shattering glasses in the apartment and, failing epically to know how to actually, I just couldn't do both hands. I couldn't. She finally said, that's enough. I mean, you got to take somebody, in a project like this. I got it, boss. Our magazine is running around the world. We're scamming money all over the place. We're going to put a baby food plant in Ethiopia and Rwanda, and we're going to use all these different people, and we'll do it with a for-profit company, and we won't do any reporting properly. That's our plan. You take the person, you say, listen, why don't you live on the street? Because you're making less sense than these people you see now all across New York City, unfortunately, are talking to the wall or the ceiling. It's just ridiculous. So let's go to the next page. Okay, so what I did, again, I don't know, maybe Madame Ardern is way ahead of me here, and maybe she's a PhD in development economics, but what I tried to do here is lay out, in descending order of population, some representative countries to compare and contrast these countries so people can get a sense. It's not like, cards, where an American or English pack of cards, you got 52 cards. Everyone understands there are 52 cards, there are 4 suits, there are 13 suits. It's not like this stuff is distributed. The key economic components are distributed equally around the world. They aren't. Okay? So the 1.4 billion people in China consume $4.7 trillion, which is only $3,000 a person. The population is growing very slowly. So if you're sitting there as a business person, you're saying, I make Hummers. Where should I try to sell them? You're not going to say, well, why don't I go to China, because the average person makes $3,300 and they'll be able to buy 1 Hummer handle. I mean, you look at this and you say, this is for its media population, maybe. It's for, you can't sell the average person in China much compared to what you're going to try to sell in the United States, where the average person in the United States spends $41,000 on shit in a given year, right? There you say, okay, a Hummer, we'll do that in the U.S., but not in China, right? Uh-huh. And then you say there's a relationship between the amount of money that is put into plants, into capital expenditure each year, and the amount of money that the local population spends on shit, the plant-shit relationship.
Factories, you mean?
Yeah. So if you look at the investment column, you see that China is spending $5 trillion, but its people are only consuming $4.7 trillion. Does that seem reasonable? Is there any other country on earth that has a ratio of investment to consumption 109%? No, there isn't. No one's close to it. In the past, Japan got close to it. But if you look down the list, the U.S., it's 30%. In the UK, it's 26%. Others are 30, 40, whatever. You look at this list, and you could tell right away, I can tell, that a country like China, which has been at this game of investing now for a long time, should not today be spending this type of money on projects, because the world is overflowing in excess capacity at this point in time. What this is a warning sign for is fraud, exactly the same type of fraud that we see with the Clinton Foundation, where you have this presidential center, which was supposed to cost $100 million, which is a high number, and $76 million or so, $74 million or so for the buildings, and ended up, they argued, costing $165 million in a period where prices weren't going up that much. When you see this, there's a gigantic bubble, teetering bubble in China, and it should cause you to be very suspicious of any investment projects, particularly in countries that don't have electricity, roads, employees, law, order, or hope at this point. That's not where you rush to give them money.
The Clintons should open a Tesla dealership in one of these countries
Right.
with no electricity.
That's right. Exactly. So then, you look down here at the very bottom, you have New Zealand. Its internal market is 117 billion. That's 25,000 a person. Population's actually growing pretty quickly. Now, you look, some of these countries have negative population growth. It's important to understand that in the European ones, like Germany, these figures include the immigrants who are having more babies than the Germans or the locals. So the population growth rates, the intrinsic growth rates inside many of these countries are very, very low. That means that if you're a business, you don't say in China, if the population is growing at 0.37% a year, you don't say, well, I think I'll bake in a 10% per year growth rate into my sales. Population's only growing at 0.37%. Once you get to scale in a country, your growth is going to be pretty close to population growth plus change in the value of the inflation in the local currency, in local currency terms. That's going to be your growth rate. And if it's more than that, you're very happy. You're taking share probably. So you look at this and you say, when you start going down the list here, United States consumption, $13.3 trillion. That's an interesting market. You get down into the UK, you're only 1.7, or France, 1.4, 1.7, Canada. You see these countries, and you're the prime minister or president of these smaller countries, and you say to yourself, I've risen to the top of my country. What can I do next? You're all in for globalism. You love the idea of going from being the prime minister of Australia or New Zealand to being the head of the UN or some high muckety-muck in New York or Geneva or elsewhere, because the UN and the world organizations, they never put their headquarters in the poor countries. They're smart. They have the headquarters and the diplomatic immunity. They don't pay taxes in the most expensive countries on earth because, they're so noble. That's the way they like to do it. So you look at this and, I can understand all the reasons why this current prime minister might want to do her gig, raise her kid and say, had enough. Let's go to Paris. Let's go to the OECD, or let's go to Geneva. We'll go to the UNCTAD, or we'll go to New York to the UN. But if she wants to stand up and be counted, she's going to say, hang on, let's go. Let's use our money that went into the Clinton Health Access Initiative as a test case to determine whether it makes sense to operate in the future the way we have in the past. So quickly, we'll go through the balance of the slides. All right. I was able to get, you actually could, if you would, Jason, hit this one. This I found online. This is somebody else put in a request to the government of New Zealand, and here's the formal answer. You can see how these things work, maybe. It's probably just taking a little time to load.
It's going to come all the way from New Zealand.
Via Mars.
There we go. They're actually, Tesla or whatever, SpaceX launched a network of satellites to put internet on Mars.
That's probably a Clinton project
too. It's a growth market.
That's right. What
is going on with this?
We'll sell cheeseburgers on Mars.
I think the first stage of it is to give internet to the Earth, and then they have.
So they're planning way ahead.
Yeah.
So here is what you see. This is the kind of stuff that comes out of New Zealand. So, Madame Ardern, your government provided this false information to somebody in New Zealand whose personal detail. This is a response to somebody made a request. This is online. I want to know, did any New Zealand government donate to the Clinton Foundation, being Bill and Hillary Clinton? If so, how many times, when, how much, who authorized the payments? Okay. Here's the list. So let's go back into the slide.
I wonder if that's a viewer of our show.
Hmm?
Who sent that letter?
I don't know. But here it says, I lifted some text from that response, and it says, the ministry intends to continue its work with Chai, which has been a separate legal entity. No, it wasn't a separate legal entity since January 2010. It wasn't a valid legal entity in January 2010. It hadn't received tax exemption. It had filed out an application for tax exemption, which stated that this entity was not a successor to any prior entity, and it didn't separate itself from the Clinton Foundation lawfully in March 2017. So either this person who provided the response is just not interested in knowing the details, or this person is attempting to cover up the flaws here. So in this period, prior to Hillary's losing convincingly on Election Day in 2016, 4 payments were made. We have the dates of each of them. There are 4 in that group of 2004. You see them on here, totaling in US dollars $5.852 million. Now, why do I put this up here? We see that right now in New Zealand, it is probably, approaching noon or whatever it is in New Zealand on a different date, on the 16th. So when you wire money from New Zealand to New York, you're going to have the transactions.
Time phone hack.
You're going to time phone hack yourself. You've got 2 different dates. And you can I had this experience, I bought it with Fabien actually and some investors. We bought a very small oil company, and on the date that the transaction closed, there was an abrupt movement in exchange rates that really moved against us. You can have on one date, you can have a big problem happen. So it matters precisely how you do this. You want to do it correctly. But above all, you want to make sure before the government of anything wires money to a supposed charity, that charity actually exists. But of course it didn't lawfully exist on these various dates here in 2014, 15, and 16. Now, one of the things to try to understand this, in this period, this entire period where you were wiring the first 4 payments, Madam Prime Minister, the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton didn't validly exist, and it did indeed control Chai in this time frame. It never had authority. You could check this for yourself. Hire some good lawyers, not boneheads. Hire some good lawyers to go out and check and see what Arkansas law is and what other laws the Clinton Health Access Initiative was required to follow. And they would include the laws of Massachusetts, where it was in theory headquartered, and the laws of New York, where Bill Clinton operated, the laws of Washington, D.C., where they solicited money, and other places inside and outside the U.S. You want to check all that stuff. And then you want to go, you're not going to find it without doing some digging, but I've got it for you. I put it in brackets. Around the 2nd of November, the Clinton family managed to hornswoggle, a technical term, the board of directors, and got the parent company to vest control in the Clinton family, control of this main Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, which is not allowed. This is a special type of charity. These charities that you're dealing with, Madam Prime Minister, these are charities that are called public charities. You are not allowed to let a family control a public charity under U.S. law, but the Clintons decided they were going to do that. So then you go to the next page. These are the first set of payments that you made. And this is according to you. I'm not making this up. The exchange rates we get off the site, they could be off a little bit, but...
you being New Zealand.
Hmm?
You being New Zealand. These are according to New Zealand.
Yeah, exactly. These are according to your government, Madam Prime Minister. Your government sent this letter that I referred to, and so they either know what they're talking about or they don't. And I would encourage you to go back into the records earlier than 2014, because it's possible that New Zealand government money made it to things like your Clinton Climate Initiative and other things that you don't yet know about. So here are 4 more payments. They total in US dollars $1.8 million. And the last one was as recently as April 14th, 2019. Now, what sort of checking was done here? I mean, we know in Tanzania that the Central Bank of Tanzania and the Finance Ministry of Tanzania had a massive problem when the people there said, you know what, let's raise this aid money and we'll steal it. So you could have a similar problem here in your ministry. You could have people kind of stealing money from it. Now, you have the vaunted audit on the 24th of June 2019 by a new firm, MHM. All right, it says, effective on March 7th, Chai is no longer affiliated with the foundation. Chai has not had any financial transactions during 2018 and with the foundation. Is that true? Where did you send this money? Did you send it first to the Clinton Foundation and then they sent it to Chai, or did you send it directly to Chai? What will those records show? In contrast to what the MHM audit says of New Chai, the independent entity, the Cohn-Resnick, in quotes, audit of the Clinton Foundation concerning 16 and 17 says that the Clinton Foundation continues to have 5 directors on Clinton out of 15, so a third of the directors on this New Chai. That's an affiliate. If you have, you don't control it, but if you have 3 directors out of the 15 on a board, that company is most likely an affiliate. So to say one auditor says there's no affiliation, the other auditor for the Clinton Foundation says there is an affiliation, what do you think is the truth? The truth is that neither audit should have been issued because both entities are not actually nonprofit corporations, validly organized and operated, so there shouldn't have been an audit for either company. So let's go into a little bit of detail, the next page. All right, remember I'm a reddist, that anything red is bad. So work project, if I were the Prime Minister of New Zealand and I gave a shit about this, what I would do is I would take this presentation and I'd say, all right, let's do some internal lawyering, then let's hire an American law firm to look at this and come back and say how much of what this dude is saying is right. And you're going to find out that it's all right. So the articles, I'm not going to take every point here, but the articles that a lawyer, Bruce Lindsay, who's deeply conflicted in all this, put in on September 29, 2009, do not comply with local Arkansas law for various reasons we'll get into, but they were never adopted by the full board, which is a massive problem. The application for federal tax exemption is knowingly false. The determination letter, therefore, that the IRS granted this entity is issued on false premises, so it's not reliable. They didn't file a tax return for 2009, one was required. And basically, the 2010 reports are wrong, the bylaws weren't adopted. You provided these bylaws to us on 8 December 2011, we'll get into that in a second. Every subsequent tax form and audit are false and materially misleading, and by the time you get into 13, 14, they're recklessly false. There's a pattern and practice of reckless disregard for the truth. Now, you probably hired Mr. Magoo to do your due diligence on this. I don't know if you know who Mr. Magoo is, but he's not too swift.
I thought it was Jeff Sessions.
Jeff Sessions is, smarter than Mr. Magoo. Now, Mr. Magoo is like Sergeant combination.
He couldn't see. He wasn't necessarily dumb. He just couldn't see anything.
Well, Sergeant Schultz, I know nothing. And Mr. Magoo, that was your team. Yeah. So there should be a record here, Madam Prime Minister, of the diligence that your government did before you signed up here. And there also should be the ability, as I say, you're part of this, you're the Minister for Intelligence, you should be able to, rifle through all the emails that involve your government and any piece of the Clinton orbit, be it the Clinton Climate Initiative, Chai, the Clinton Foundation, the Clintons personally. You should have all that stuff. Let's go to the next page. Just in case you're interested, okay? This is the actual link to Arkansas law that applied in this period where you claim you satisfied yourself. You say in your thing that this became an independent organization in January 2010. So the articles were adopted by one lawyer, not by the full board. That's non-compliant. And you say the bylaws were adopted on 8 December 2011. The copy that you provided us do not say amended and restated bylaws. They say final copy, bylaws, the original bylaws. So this thing didn't have bylaws between September 29th, 2009 and 8 December 2011. It didn't exist. And it certainly didn't exist in January 2010. This statute which is the version that would have applied in 2010 and 11, it makes clear that organization is different than incorporation. Organization is you complete the organization by appointing officers, and a key officer is Bill Clinton, and another one's Ira Magaziner, adopting bylaws, and carrying on any other business before the meeting. If they didn't adopt bylaws, they weren't organized until 8 December 2011. So your statement about January 2010 is wrong. Now, the bylaws state that you're going to have that were adopted on the 8th of December 2011, that you're going to have 9 directors. Okay? So if you go down a little bit here, just the page, while all this was going on, if we want to give a brief commercial to our good friend Fabien, here's the show that's on the long side. This is, I think, the longest show we ever did. It's 3.5 hours long.
Ooh, yeah.
That's pretty long.
Indeed.
Where Fabien and you and I, it's the Pinko Panthers. It's the first exposure of Fabien to our audience, I believe, where we take people through in gory detail the degree to which an entity, the largest donor to the Clinton Foundation, Unitaid, was giving money illegally to Chai.
Look at how dark we were back in the day,
Yeah,
Charles. I don't
it's
know
amazing.
if people have noticed these incremental improvements to the show.
Well done. There's Fabien
Fixing his hair.
fixing his hair, coming in from Japan. So anyway, people can go and should look at this. And this coming Sunday, we will have our great friend Fabien back on again.
That'll be a good episode.
Yeah. So let's go to the next page. Somehow. All right. So this says that the Clinton Foundation is going to appoint 5 successor directors. Now, a successor director means that you have original directors. The Articles of Incorporation should state the names of the initial directors, and the versions that are presented by your government, Madam Prime Minister, to your member of the public who made the OIA request are non-compliant with Arkansas law. This says, that an entity called the William J. Clinton Foundation is going to appoint these 5 successor directors. When you go back into this history, Madam Prime Minister, you're going to discover that the William J. Clinton Foundation was every bit as bad as New Chai. It didn't have bylaws. It didn't have articles. It hadn't filed anything properly. So it couldn't designate anything because it didn't exist lawfully.
Did you notice the bylaw, Charles?
Yeah, there you go. So these bylaws contradict the articles, and they also violate Arkansas law. So the bylaws are, from what I could tell, they're just hopeless. And the directors, the term, that is to say the length of time that you're going to be allowed to be a director, the way I read this, Bill and Ira are appointed to be directors for life. You're not allowed to do that. You have to have a fixed term. And this, remember, is a public charity. So that means that it cannot be controlled by somebody as a divine right. And remember that while Bill wasn't getting paid a salary, Chai was reimbursing his Pasha level travel around the world to Africa, and everyone presidential planes and suites and banquets and people who shouldn't have been on the trip, rock stars, whatever, going with him to these ridiculous junkets. All of that was paid for, and that really, I would argue, should have been taxed as income to Bill personally, and then he should, income, you pay the taxes on it, and then he funds the expenses out of his own pocket. I mean, there's no, because you operate a charity.
Doesn't mean you get free flights on private jets.
Yeah, that's not the way, even just because you're the former president of the United States, that's not the way it works. So remember also, and we're going to close with this, that there are 4 documents in this time frame that predate your decision to fund this fraud, all of which are false. So on the 14th of November 2011, let's just pull that one up as an example. Remember, supposedly you had adopted bylaws on the 8th of December, yeah, that first one, in which you said you need 9 directors. Okay, so here if we hit, yeah, and we go down this page by page, you have to go slowly. It's like three pages in from here or so. This is the first one, and I think it's the next page. Yes, page after. There you go. No, page after. Sorry, it's going to be up at the top. That right there. Line 1A. Enter the number of voting members of the governing body at the end of the tax year. What number do you see, Jason?
I don't see anything there.
7.
Oh, yeah, there.
Is 7
It's tiny.
less than 9?
Seems to be.
Yeah, you were supposed to have 9, and here you say you had 7.
9.
9. It's like it's when George Costanzo doesn't want the babies, so he says, "I think we're going to name the baby 7. 7's a great." Anyway,
I was thinking of Ferris Bueller had been truant 9 times. 9.
So it's supposed to be 9 directors. On November 14th, 2011, you claim you have 7. On December 8th, 2011, you change your bylaws to say that you have 9 minimum. All right. So let's go back in there. And there are 3 versions of the 2010 990 for this Clinton Health Access Initiative. One of which is on the Clinton Foundation website if you dig. But you go to ProPublica and you get all 3. On the 22nd of November 2011, the lawyers for Clinton Health Access Initiative, which had been illegally organized and was operating illegally, before adopting bylaws for the main thing, set up a UK subsidiary. That's a violation of UK law and US law. Right? Did you catch that? Is any of that in your files? You know, when you go, Madam Prime Minister, through your files, you go and look and see, did you study all the subsidiaries of Chai around the world to make sure they were operating lawfully in every jurisdiction? Because you'd find out that they hadn't been. So who did Mr. Magoo and Sergeant Schultz did your due diligence. You're going to be able, I hope, you have some professional firms you can go against. By the 11th of January 2012, so shortly after adopting bylaws, let's look at that version, Jason. Same place. This is the second version of the 2010 990, filed on my birthday in 2012. Go down the page to approximately like 5 or 6 pages in. That same box. Next, right there. Does it say in 1A, does it say 9? Still 7. Okay, so after you supposedly changed the number of directors via your bylaws to 9, you say here to the IRS it was 7. So one of those is wrong. Let's see. By November 21st, 2013, had you managed to fix this? Let's look at the same place.
I bet no.
Yeah, pretty much. This whole idea of having at least 2 sources. Here's 3 sources. So it's like 6 pages in. There you go. 7. All right, so you repeatedly are contradicting yourself. Your bylaws said you had 9. Clinton Foundation is going to be 5 of them. These say 7. This is something you should have checked. You should have asked questions. There must be a record in the files whether you did or did not do this. So, Madam Prime Minister, we've gone on a little bit long today, but that is the bulk of today's presentation. I have sent you an email with my contact information by email. I prefer email. And I know you're very busy. You have a young child. You really should be devoting your time to that and your job, of course. But you must have somebody in your government who works on your staff who might take an interest in this. And the good news is that you've only been defrauded here by about $7.5 million. Plus whatever costs your government incurred to move this fraud along. There are governments. The government of France has been defrauded to the tune of 300 million. Norway about 100 million, and there are other governments that are going to do something about this. So you may be so rich that it's like, I don't open up this can of worms. It's not clear who else. Maybe there's a New Zealand company that was benefiting from this. The name of one investor is redacted in these filings that we got back from you. So maybe the previous government or current government is trying to protect a large New Zealand company that will be embarrassed here. I hope not. But we're going to keep pulling on this. You, as a young mother and as a decent human being, should want to pull on this. And, I hope you're going to rise to the occasion and not perform the way Eric Hansen, the CPA firm, is performing, because he's not going to have a good rest of his life.
Wow. That's a pretty poor prognosis for Eric Hansen.
Or the boss of the whole BKD firm. So with that, Jason, we're 9 minutes over.
Isn't he the boss of BKD?
No, he's chief operating officer. There's a chief executive officer whose name I forget, but the whole senior leadership team at BKD needs to be.
Yeah. Well, Charles, great presentation once again. I think I've got the audio thing sorted out, but we'll have it better for next time. It's an ongoing process. Sometimes you have to
Dive into it.
Power through.
So if people need to support Crowdsource the Truth?
Absolutely. I totally appreciate the people that are doing that. They can go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And coming up at 7 o'clock tonight, we've got the first episode in 2020 of High Dive with Lee Stranahan. We're going to be looking at the Iran crisis and how journalism responded to that. Everybody knows that Lee likes to do these deep dives, and he takes his journalism very seriously. So I hope that people will join us there on Subscribestar and Patreon. Special thanks to the sponsors that have been with us there and continue to make the show possible. So, Charles, I'll see you on Sunday, and see everybody later tonight. Thanks for watching.